Aloha from the Pacific Northwest, and thank you for your support of Indie Agency News. As you can see, pointing that way. I don't have it mirrored. Doug Zanger, Editor-in-Chief, Indie Agency News. And we're chugging along and, of course, fixing some things because certainly that is the way it happens when we all start something, right? But site's good to go at the moment. Plenty of things coming your way. A couple of things this week. We'll have a new Meet and Indie agency. This is a chance for everyone to get to know independent agencies a little bit more. And you can see 3 so far, all supported by PJX Media. And the 3 agencies up so far: Cornet, The Many, 3 Black Dot, and our guests, who I'm extraordinarily thrilled to be joining here in a second, will probably have a few things to say about a lot of these independent agencies. Also, our first award is on the books for Indie Agency News Honors, and we're doing this every month, and we're kicking off with Producer of the Year. Go to indieagency.news to learn more. And as mentioned, be bringing a couple of our friends from Ad Age over here in a second. Before we start, though, I do want to take a moment and send all the love possible and all the support possible to the family, friends, and colleagues of Suki Thompson, who passed away at the end of July. She was the founder of Let's Reset and executive director of Oyster Catchers in the UK. Suki was truly a force for good. And when I worked for Advertising Week, the events over there, I got a chance to know Suki a little bit and fully understand why a lot of people, many, everybody considers her one of the kindest, most supportive people in our world. Please join me in sending your support, and you can show it even more with a donation to Macmillan Cancer Support. So sending the good vibes, and we're going to keep the good vibes going. I am so pleased to bring 2 of the very best in our business on, one of whom I guess I kind of worked. Judy, did I kind of work for you back in the 2000s? Is that
Kinda.
Yeah. Is that how that worked? Oh my goodness. Yeah. So so Judy Pollack, executive editor at Ad Age, Brian Bonilla, senior reporter at Ad Age. So Brian knows the story on this. Judy clearly knows the story on this. I was in radio back in, long time, but in the 04 stretch, my corporate stretch, I had written something to Jonah Bloom and said, "Hey, that was a really nifty post. You seem like a nice fella." And then he emailed back and said, "We're looking for writers. Would you want to write?" And that's how I got to know Ken Wheaton, who brought me on as a blogger for the Small Agency Diary, which has, I mean, absolutely taken on this huge, vastly important role in the growth of independent and small agencies. And so this in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, which conference was this one? Which number was it?
Oh gosh, I'm not even sure.
22?
22?
Does that sound about right?
I'd have to really check. I don't know.
I mean, clearly math not my strong suit here. But yeah, I mean, definitely over 20 years. But the thing I want to just start with is, obviously I worked for competitive magazines and all of that. But the thing that just always, there's always been this tangible excitement from small and independent agencies about what this program means to them. And the feedback that I got from people in Atlanta, I mean, it's always been extraordinarily positive. It felt like it kicked into another gear. Talk a little bit about what stood out to you most about this year's event in terms of vibe and feeling of the attendees.
I agree with you, especially the last couple of years. I really think it just went up a notch completely. Sadly, I was not on the ground in Atlanta this year because my husband had a medical emergency and I couldn't go at the last minute. But I have watched video from every single session, and I've talked to so many people who emailed me throughout the conference and after. And I honestly feel like it's such a community and it's growing and it's getting stronger and close knit every year. In fact, somebody joked it was almost like a religious cult. There are founders who said to me, "This is like my therapy. This is amazing. I love being able to share peer to peer." So I just think it really had to step up. But Brian, you were actually there. You probably have a better feel for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been with Ad Age for almost 3 years now, but honestly, this year just felt, I don't know, it was not that it wasn't the year before, but the energy was very palpable. And, I think we had over 300 attendees, and Judy, you might know this exact number, but, um, you know, and from the people I spoke to, it seemed like everyone walked away with a different nugget that they enjoyed from the conference, which I think shows the success of a conference where it's not too lopsided in one way or the other. And it really, there was a lot of new agency faces this year, I would say, which was also pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of the award winners, because every year it's a veritable buffet of new stuff, which is always great. Let's talk about the mood, because we talked about the vibe. Let's talk about the mood, because obviously nobody knows if we're going to be in a recession. Nobody knows what this, nobody knows what's that. Nobody knows if a bunch of new indie agencies are going to be launching because of staffing changes. Let me put that charitably. But how would you assess the mood about the industry and the business based upon what you saw and heard?
There's still a lot of positivity because people are really, but there is a wait and see. Budgets obviously are being formulated for the next year. In fact, I think it was Brian's panel. Somebody said we're going to form an agency called December because, and a lot of clients have been dragging out their reviews. And I've heard that there's some, like a year later, people still haven't launched the creative for it.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't, weren't able to yet. But what some people said to us was that in bad times, we need this camaraderie even more than ever. That, we need to learn from each other. Like, we have this problem. How are you solving it? So there's all this peer-to-peer interaction. And the way I program it really is to try, I talk to people all throughout the year.
Sure.
What are your pain points? What do you need to see? What do you want to hear about? And we try and really tailor it specifically to issues that people want help with. So I think people were positive and nervous at the same time, if that's such a thing.
That is a great way of discussing it, because I think that after the pandemic hit, in my experience, I said at the very beginning that really things will start feeling settled. And I'm using that term really in air quotes here. They'll feel settled in 2024, or at least we'll have a better idea of where all of this is going to shake out. And what I've observed feels somewhat similar. And Brian, I think, probably was in third grade when you and I saw this in 2008, 2009, where you start seeing these eras and these golden eras and these phases of independent agencies popping up. So big agencies contract, talent gets out into the universe, they start something brilliant. It feels as though that we're in we could potentially be in another one of those phases, but it feels to me that there's increasing levels of sophistication. So 08, 09, digital really hadn't really jumped off quite yet. So it seems like it's a very interesting era right now. And I'm curious about some of the takeaways and more of those conversations, maybe based on those presentations. Brian, and you were there. What were some of the takeaways that you felt were important for that community based on some of those presentations, with Judy saying that we always want to program it to critical relevance?
Right. I mean, and to piggyback a little on the conversations that were happening, from the agencies I was talking to there, it was a lot of conversations around new business, right? And the conversation, I just wrote an article about, is the logjam over for creative agencies in terms of new business. And, from the sense that I got was a lot of people felt in the small agency community that, while there might be more opportunities, they feel it's way more competitive than they've ever felt before, and they're competing with larger agencies than they're used to, maybe. And I think one of the panels that stood out to me was how to we have a panel on how to beat the majors, and we had Preacher, who won Foot Locker, and Cartwright, who won Chipotle, and just some of the advice I think that they were giving on how they were able to manage that competitive landscape. It comes down to just finding, knowing what's the right opportunity that for you, because I know small agencies have to say no a lot, and finding out what's the right yes in your opinion, I think was a big one. And the other panel that I thought was interesting too was just, we wrote a story on how to PR your agency, and
right.
This is something that honestly I think even large agencies could.
I mean,
but like for some agencies, that you're so focused on the work, right? That
right.
You're not really thinking about how do I get, attention from my business, and
right.
It's not just about dealing with reporters, right? It's how do I have a LinkedIn strategy that works out for me, that gets attention, and that's something we touched on the panel, and we had two other PR professionals along with myself on that.
Right.
As well.
Right. I know Rob Riley, keynote. That excellent choice. I mean, chef's kiss. There you go. When you bring somebody in, I've seen, again, I worked for the Martin agency. So when Kristen Cavallo would go into, independent or small agency environments, there is an interesting, I would say somewhat a cognitive dissonance of bringing somebody from a holding company coming in to talk to small agencies and independent agencies. But I also know that people love that perspective and that point of view. So excellent choice on Rob, of course. What were some of the things that you felt he brought to the mix that were important for small agencies?
Well, you mentioned Kristen. She keynoted the previous year.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that, there are some issues that are germane to an agency, no matter whether you're big, whether you're small, whether you're medium sized. And so, for example, Kristen had been around the time of that whole Coinbase thing, and
oh, geez,
yeah, but she had really stood up for the business as a whole. Right. She really put herself out on the line, and I thought that was amazing, and I thought it was perfect for the group that year because of that. And then this year, Rob. Well, actually, at the time we booked him, we didn't really know that they were going to buy part of Majority.
Right.
So it was sort of a perfect storm there. But that, again, it's a huge agency showing support for a smaller agency, which is rocketed on its own, of course. But his whole topic was think small even when you're a giant. And he talked about, Rob didn't always work for holding companies, right?
Right.
He, started out, with some small agencies and his whole experience at Crispin. And I thought he was really good in that he talked about his own experience. He even talked a little bit about, he had written something called "I'm a Recovering Asshole."
I remember that.
Yeah. Same mistakes he made, on the way up and what he learned from them. But he also brought things like saying to the agencies, well, don't say I can't do good work because I don't have the budget. He said there was no budget for Fearless Girl, and look at it now. So I think, and he was very inspirational. And so many of the people in the audience knew him because they worked for him at one time or another. It's like old home week sometimes. So
right. Yeah. I would say also, like, what he added was, he tried to bring elements of, he propped up with small agencies he thought were doing really great work. And, he even, I think one line that I know a founder of an agency told me stuck out to them was that, he admitted on stage that he was always a little too scared to start his own agency, right? And that sounds, funny coming to, the global CCO of WP, So I think people need to hear that, right? It's that right is important, and it's a risk, but it's also something that isn't for everyone. But if it's for you, like that's special, right?
Yeah, and that brings up a really, really good point. I think that we on our side of it, I don't say we forget to do it, but I think that sometimes when we're interviewing these, giants of the industry, that sometimes sometimes and I'm meaning like all of us, including this, the people who are the subjects of this, those moments of introspection and those moments of vulnerability present an interesting vulnerability that I believe look at me using fancy words, engenders like a tremendous amount of confidence, because it's like, no, you can do this. You absolutely can do this. And that was one of the things that I think from the people that I spoke to that were in Atlanta was there's a little bit of swagger now, like in a very, very positive and productive way. Everybody that came out of it felt more confident about not just the industry and this part of the industry, but what they're doing. So in a lot of ways, that's a tremendous service, but it's also very, it just felt like a nice organic way to, really to really move things forward. Were you hearing that as well?
Yeah. And I think one of the things we're sort of celebrating here is ingenuity, right?
Mm,
And in times of trouble, people really get more creative. And I'm not talking about campaigns here. I'm talking about methods of billing, going away from time
right.
based. People are trying things called like sprints and things like that. So we tried to uncover like some things that people are doing because it's now a project world. And
Right.
these small agencies are actually much better equipped than the holding companies to do this kind of work and to be very creative in how they bill, how they think. So we shared a lot of that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I want to go to the awards here for a second. So let's see here. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see if I can do this without botching it. There's always a possibility that I could botch it. All right, I think we got it. All right, there we go. All right, so let me make this a little bit bigger here. All right, I'm gonna start. Oh, there we go. There's Orchard right there, right at the top. I mean, just nutty, wacky, awesome. Like, thank you for doing weird advertising.
Mhm.
I mean, thank God. That's what we're supposed to do. Oh my gosh. All right, so I'm gonna scroll. So this is like a little game here. And then you tell me to stop if you want to talk about one of what I'm scrolling.
Well, we
So,
can stop right at the
all
top. We
right,
can talk
stop.
about,
Go ahead. Go for it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, well, SLAP, I think, is another case of an agency that is changing the way things are done. Like they're fully
Right.
remote, they're in different countries, they're still doing great creative work, but it's not the same old, same old. Not to say that, Jerry Graff is super creative, always has been, but he's completely reinvented himself.
Right.
And his last agency had a funeral, and so
Right.
I just think it's one example of how you don't have to do things the typical way and still rise to the top.
Right. No, that's a good point. That from Tim Nudd, our good friend. So we
All
got
right.
Supernatural. Go ahead.
There, Brian, you love AI. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Supernatural.
It felt poignant, right? Like the year of AI, right? But it's interesting that, I mean, we knew about Supernatural for a few years now, but it felt like this year they've really proved kind of what they set out to prove, at least from the scale that you can.
Excellent point.
Which was, can you merge creative and AI? And I do think, honestly, like from all the agencies I talked to, they're probably doing it in one of the more interesting ways, which is building out their own version of, not an operating system per se, but just their own ecosystem of AI tools. And they're working with clients like Kayak and Zipcar, and they're only, honestly, I think like a 20-person agency, right? And, these are former founders of Heat, which was bought by Deloitte Digital. And
I know that one very well, Brian.
But they still are creative, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what, at the bottom line, they still want to infuse in their agency. So
Yep. All right, I've had a chance to talk to the folks at Atlantic. They're hilarious. They're great.
I got to check out their office.
And I mean, look at 1 to 10. These are 1 to 10 people. Like,
I know.
It's amazing what great work they're doing. And, it's also a discovery for us. Like, I had never heard of Hey, Let's Go until we judged it.
Right.
So that's just another thing. It's like somebody told me that Atlantic wasn't even going to apply because they felt, oh, we're too young, we're too small, we'll never have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a discovery process for us. We get to learn more, and look what happened,
Right.
So apply even if you're not sure you should.
I mean, amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
If nothing else, we'll get to know you better. And, when we cover other stories, we'll remember, oh, this agency is pretty clever. Maybe we'll call them, for a
Yep.
story we're working on.
That's
So,
true. Very,
yeah.
very true. Okay. And then we've got majority and curiosity. Alerma, always interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and they actually appeared at the conference, and we had a panel on how to deal with a politically divisive country, how to market in that.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about the Jesus ads, and
Right.
they were very upfront, which I thought was great. They just a really courageous agency, and they do really good work. Whatever your religious beliefs are, whatever anything, nobody can say that they weren't beautifully crafted ads. Those are fantastic. So,
Right. No,
yeah.
I don't disagree. May not be the cut of one's jib, but everyone has a different jib.
I think
go ahead.
Orchard, obviously the ocean spray work was standout, but what stood out too was that it was effective, right? And
right.
I think that's, we had them do a case study for us at the conference, where we got the marketing lead along with David Kovas, who's a riot, to just talk about how they created the ad, and just a deep dive. They showed videos of the different cast, like they casted like 20 different actors for the jiggling part, and you got to see like what didn't make it, what did make it, and it's just like, it's interesting to see that, right? And especially as a small agency, it gives you ideas of, how could I approach something,
right.
next time.
Okay, so here's my little corner of the world. Now hold on. I may have a small nit here, so just bear with me. Little Big Engine, great agency, Salt Lake City. PB and great agency, Seattle. I always thought Utah was more like next to Colorado, and like there's mountains in the way. Like we're weird up here, so like we have our little corner up here. All right, so that's my little nit. That's it.
I have to blame Ken Wheaton for that, because Ken did this a million years ago. He carved the country up.
Oh no!
Yes.
Okay, so this does also bring up a bigger point where I just have to get more Portland, Seattle, Central Oregon, Washington, Idaho. We count. There's some great shops in Boise. So okay, so you've given me a task. All right, and I'll take this up with Ken and his gorgeous dog Ruby. I did get a chance to go hiking with Ken and the dog back in January, and it was fantastic. Let's go. Oh, Quality Meats still. So Judy, you and I have been around the block.
Yeah.
Quality Meats. Would you consider Quality Meats a top 5 quirky independent agency name?
Oh, in terms of names?
Yeah.
I've seen so many over the years, but no, that's a pretty good one, I must say.
I miss Office of Baby. Remember them?
Oh yeah, yes, I do. Which turned into another agency. I can't.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Don't remember. It's been a minute.
People change their names all the time. But,
I know. I just thought that was so hilariously weird. So
well, my father was a butcher, so
get out. Really?
Yes.
Oh my God. All right.
I think on the list, I think the better name is Bear Meets Eagle on Fire. Is that?
Bear Meets Eagle on Fire. Yeah, that's a good one.
Wait, where?
International. It's a Canadian agency.
Oh, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right. Eric and Coleman, great. Partyland, hilarious.
Yeah.
Preacher. Oh, you got you got Austin represented incredibly well. There we go. Bear Meets Eagle on Fire.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. Let me see here. Who wrote that one? Oh, Judy, you wrote that one.
I did.
Okay, tell us about this agency. So Australia.
Well,
okay.
It was just, the creative was just so, look at the art, right?
Right.
It was like a 30s anime kind of thing. Actually, I'm sorry, it's an Australian agency, but
yeah.
It's just clever ideas when they were trying to promote, I think it was an online gaming thing. they actually created a game where the candidates for prime minister could
Right.
box each other, and you can actually sort of vote, quasi vote. You're not actually voting the election, but by choosing who's going to win this boxing match. There, I mean, it was just really clever ideas. The insurance campaign was fun. You're watching to figure out, like, there's cars driving down the road, and its wheel goes off, but it comes back on, and you're trying to figure it out. And basically, it's until the world fixes itself, we're here for you for your insurance.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And you've expanded, Ad Age has expanded out some of the categories. Now, we've all of us in this side of the business have had this conversation about agency culture. And I suppose you could say the early 2000s was the advent of kegs and ping pong tables, and thankfully we've evolved far past that. I'm curious about, these are two very, very good winners, but I have to imagine that the conversation around choosing the short list and the winners for this, because agency culture it can be so subjective. I'm just curious about how these two agencies rose to the top in your minds.
It's a mixture of a lot of things. I think you're right. It used to be like beer pong and stuff like that. But now I really think it's benefits are very important, right? And I think it's really just people really feeling they belong. I did a panel on Mirren for Mirren a couple of years ago, and we're talking about how cultures, what it means, what your agency stands for right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually germane to the whole conversation, right? And this is something came up in our at the conference again and again. It's like you have to have an identity for yourself. Like if, for example, just to say mischief, I mean, what you're getting with mischief, right?
Right.
It's right in the name. It's right in everything. And I think culture is now being evolved to mean that. Like, what does your agency mean? What does it mean to employees? How are you living that mission within your own self?
Right. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a smart way into it, because it can be very easy to get into the merchandising of a culture as opposed to the essence of a culture.
And speaking of like benefits, like I think Common has the tattoo stipend. So it's like a stipend for your employees to get a tattoo. So like, I think in a world where that could sound like just like a random thing, right? But in a world where we're not together all the time,
right?
I think benefits like that, where you're thinking about, what do people actually want, and how can I offer it? I think it's interesting. And I think, in the future, we're going to see, like, I think retention is going to play a big factor in, how these awards are, because are you retaining your employees? How's your diversity? Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be much more than a physical space.
Yep. Let's move. Let me see. So obviously the Pepsi redesign was a big one. Media is an interesting one. And actually I'd like to put a pin in media for a deeper discussion with all of you at Ad Age, because there's stuff happening in media that I just don't think that we can necessarily go too deep into, but to me, it's a very interesting conversation. Media mother launch, having their media practice. I just feel like that's an interesting conversation, and I don't want to give it short shrift. Newcomers, always fantastic. Let's see here. Okay. Was this the first? This wasn't the first year of Purpose Led, was it?
No.
It was
third? It's relatively new. Yeah.
Third, it was the first year for design and
first
PR.
Year design. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
PR was new this year.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm sure you got lots of pitches on that.
Well, it's funny.
Come on. Levity.
At the award, I wasn't at the award show, but I was told that the 1964 agency, or was it Bowden? One of them got up and said that and he told this story, and I should know which agency it is, but told a story about how he had all this terrible stuff that happened in his life. His house had burned down or whatever.
Jesus.
And he was so happy to win this award. I mean, it was, it's
That's
people
awesome.
Are so appreciative. They really are. We actually had, and this is sort of like an ad for us, but somebody actually stood up on stage and said, I learned more at this conference in 3 hours than I did at Cannes in 3 days.
I
So
mean,
excuse the commercial there.
I
But,
mean, no, shameless self-promotion
mhm.
is welcomed here. Of course, we've got some really good campaigns that came out here. Joan continuing to fire on all cylinders. B2B is tough, as we all know. That's very, very tough. Being in Oregon, the Blockbuster one, that was, I like that. Cornet horse kicks. We all kind of knew that one was gonna get a little something. I mean, that was really great. Cornet did a really nice job.
Yeah.
That was a lot. That was a lot.
I only wish, I had a horse so I can buy sneakers, That's my
Well, when you come visit me in Portland, presumptive close, I'll take you out to the farm where my daughter rides, and we'll get some kicks for a horse. I picked the cheap sports for the kids. Let's see, Joan showing up again, of course, Orchard. Yeah, and again, so the media campaigns are real interesting to me. So I think I do want to have a deeper discussion on media, because I just think there's so much more to really, really tap into.
Well, a note you should, just to make sure everybody knows, that the campaigns are chosen by outside judges, so
Yep.
they're not ad age editors. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nope. Good disclaimer there. And then we'll go down to the people. There's David wearing some overalls, of course. Marceline Award, we're very proud of it. Opinionated here in Portland. Mike and Chris from OKRP. My kids, in the teen milieu, love the new Burger King work. It goes back to what advertising can and should do. That earworm. it just gets you.
And making things completely new. Like so many young people never heard of, hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, or whatever,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that was one thing I always appreciate about Wyden. I remember seeing them at Cannes with KFC, and one of the things that they do is they say they go into a brand's attic to see what's up there and to see, what could we use again? What could we use again? And I think that's really smart, because and Judy, I think you can relate to this. There are a lot of times in this industry where people of a certain age tend to wax somewhat too poetic about it and too nostalgic about it, as opposed to really taking a critical look at how a brand was initially built and seeing where there might be kernels to pull out. And I don't mean kernels like KFC, but kernels from a brand to be able to infuse it into the new generation. Because you're right, it's the stuff that we might take for granted and take a look at and be like, oh, they didn't have that. If you bring that back, that can actually work in the contemporary world. That was more of a that's more of a monologue. But it's true. But it's very, very true. So what? Before I have something that I do want to play before we go. But what? Again, we've gone back to this thing where it feels like independent agencies and small agencies are having a moment. What are some other things that maybe from the conference and the awards, or just the day-to-day, that you're seeing that is a real positive for small and independent agencies?
Well, I mean, I talked about this a little already, but I think their ability to be nimble, you're not worried about, well, you are worried about the bottom line, but you don't have a bunch of shareholders breathing down your neck, right? So you can be more creative. You think differently about how you do things. And I also think they're a close-knit community, even within their own shops, like they're family with one another. So I just think that it's the place to be right now. And I'm honestly I'm hearing about more shops coming up all the time. And I think actually next year might be a boom year for hearing about more small agencies.
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm hearing about more like just two people who don't even have an agency pitching for pretty large projects. And like Judy said, I think that's going to be a trend we're seeing grow, is the creation of more small agencies. And on terms of the conversation piece, I think what was special about this year's conference is you can talk about maybe the little like topics that you are kind of scared to ask questions about, like, am I pricing this correctly? Should I be a value? Should I do value-based pricing versus hourly pricing? Like, should I, how do I, go about approaching procurement if I'm not happy about, if the client not wanting to give me credit for work? It's like, these are specific topics for small agencies, and I think is what is the big positive of this.
Right. Okay. So before we go, Brian, I just want to play this real quick and just give us a minute and we'll be right back.
Meet the Mets, step right up.
Hold it again, please, hold it again.
Bring your kids, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet.
Hold it again, please, hold it again.
From New York town.
Hold it again.
Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down.
Hold it again.
'Cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting and
Hold it again.
come on and meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step up and greet the Mets. Bring your...
All right. I had to do that. That is the
We're
longest.
having a nice conversation, Doug. And
I know that was the longest 1 minute and 22-second video I've ever seen.
Oh my
I was like, this is kind of dragging. Maybe I should cut in. No, I had to do that, and I had to put in the Phillies celebrating in 2008. I decided to wait. Now, Judy, are you a Mets fan or are you a Yankees fan?
I'm not a sports fan at all. So
Okay, so we can recruit you. You're ready to be recruited.
There you go.
Love it. I love
yeah,
it.
I
More
know.
Philadelphia sports fans.
I purposefully avoided Truist Park when I was in Atlanta. So just...
Okay. I think that's very fair. All right, just a little fun at the end there, but this has been great. This has been very, very fun. Brian, thank you so much. Judy, thank you so much. And I'll say this publicly. Ad Age was one of the biggest kickstarts of my career, and so I'm incredibly grateful to you, and I'm grateful for all the people that are at Ad Age and have been at Ad Age throughout the years for giving me a little kickstart in my career. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all of us, being me and one other person at Indie Agency News, thanks for joining us at Indie Agency News Live, and we will see you next time.